Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to another episode of Video Games Gaiden. Today I am joined by number one Bioshock collector, Emperor Fox. Would you kindly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Emperor Fox here. Glad to be on the podcast.
So today's topic is a little bit of a mixed bag. We're going to be talking about working designs, our times discovering working designs, playing working designs games, growing up with working designs, and playing a working designs game in the modern sense. But before we get into that, Emperor Fox, my man, my dude, who I've shared many unhealthy beverages and meals with. What do you do? How do you hang out on social media? What's going on?
What I do? Well, for a living, I work for the government. I'm a SATCOM guy, satellite communications. Uh, what I do in my free time is gaming from what I can fit in. And then I have an enormous backlog of not just video games, but TV shows and animes because I can never get through everything I want to watch or play. Other than that, it's family time, spend some time with my son, my wife, and you know, that's that's what I do. Collecting working designs too, which I completed semi recently.
Yeah, and that's also part of the reason why I thought this particular episode would be great for you because I was there for a bunch of them, which was pretty cool. Because
Yep.
I was literally watching like, oh man, he's getting closer and closer.
Yep. You were there when I got what was it, Wicked Phenomenon for Turbo Graphics. That's one I thought I would never see in the wild, but we found it at Midwest Gaming Classic. Also picked up Kadash with you, a couple of others too, like Shining Wisdom, I believe.
You almost picked up
Yeah,
Magic Knight, but that guy literally wasn't budging.
it was a budget, $1,200. Come on, budge. And I even offered a like 1,000, and then he would not budge. And then I was like, 5 months later, I got it online for 700. So I won.
Yeah, no. Well, arguably, depending on how you look at it, I mean, my
Well,
copy, I mean, you have a bigger working designs collection than I do because I pretty much stuck to the RPGs. I didn't bother with the spaz titles or anything like that. And I also don't have a copy of Iron Sword, not Iron Sword. Wow, Iron Storm. Just because
mhm,
I tried it and I was like, I need a mouse and keyboard for this. Like my brain can't function. And
it's rough.
and it's like that's a weird title for them too. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So you're on YouTube, you've been on YouTube for a minute, you've been chronicling your collection this entire time. And I have to also say you got a pretty sweet game room. So as these things start out, I like to ask three random questions. And first question, right off the muscle. When you were moving into your current home, were you looking around thinking I could put a game room here? Be honest.
Oh, absolutely. That was part of the plan was, moving around and when we would go and see houses and stuff like that, I'd, venture into the basements and whatnot, and I'd be like, this one would be okay for a game room, but let me go look at the other one because one of these is going to be a game room. So yeah, absolutely. I needed well, lack of better words, a lot of married guys need a man cave or whatever. It's just a place to put all the ugly junk that the wife does not want to see in the rest of the house. So it's a great place for me to escape and, put all my collection into one spot. So absolutely needed to find a game room in the new house.
And was she aware of this when you were house shopping?
Absolutely. She knew.
And she was on board with it.
Yes.
You see,
She really liked the idea of, well, now all his ugly stuff can be in that one area where he can create the clutter everywhere. So yeah, she was on board because she likes to support my hobby as best as possible, and give me a place to where I can escape into my games and stuff. So really appreciate that.
yeah, I have a storage unit, because I live in Manhattan and don't have much of a choice. But
Yeah, I believe that.
there are times where like Katie and I will even talk about like if we were to move or get a bigger place or whatnot. I'm like, oh, if we get like a two-bedroom place, because in New York that's big time. Um, I'm like, that could be a game room. She's like, well, I have a lot of books. I'm like, oh, you can have a corner, and then I'll take the rest of it. And she goes, oh, what? For the games, the guitars, the music, the anime, the Blu-rays, the DVDs, and I get what? A chair and like a little bookshelf. Now, mind you, Katie has just as many books as I have games, probably
Ooh,
close to the same amount as you. But the difference is she has read 80% of them. Well, you and I have probably only gotten through 5% of our backlogs.
yeah, wow. Yeah, you were like, "Well, you can have a reader's nook," and then in reality, you're like, "Ooh, she needs a library."
No, she really does. Like, I mean, even behind me, you could see the games up top here. These following down are all books. And then there's 4 more massive bookshelves outside. And then I have a storage unit for my nonsense.
It's true what a lot of people say, behind every married gamer, there's usually an avid reader, and everybody I talk to, it's pretty much that is true. Because my wife loves to read too. She doesn't have a massive collection, but she reads all the time.
What does she read?
A little bit of everything. I mean, she's all over the place. She likes a little bit of uh fiction, nonfiction. She likes like even self-help stuff or, uh, she's spread out all over all genres.
Yeah, Katie mostly reads vampire romance novels, which I make fun of her about all the time. I'm like, "Oh,
That's
is this
fun.
Twilight?" And she's like, "No, Alex, this isn't Twilight." I'm like, "Oh, is this Twilight?" She's like, "It doesn't even have Twilight in the title." Like, cut it out.
Do they sparkle?
Do they sparkle? Alright, so next question here. As I mentioned earlier, you and I have shared many unhealthy meals together. We've also drank a lot of unhealthy stuff together, and I know you're a beer guy. So, what are your top 3 beers? Wrong answers
Ooh.
only.
Wrong answers only.
Yeah.
This is tough. I'm a big Sam Adams guy. I love Sam Adams beer. And one of my favorite, probably my favorite, two favorites that they make. Their summer ale is excellent. Um, their winter lager is amazing, and I also enjoy the porch rocker. So I got 3 seasons of beers there, and then you can just throw in Oktoberfest, and there you got 4 seasons of great beers. Um, there is a little brewery in Maine called Shipyard,
Mhm. I'm
and they
familiar.
make my favorite pumpkin ale, which is Pumpkinhead.
That's incorrect. Okay,
And
continue.
there you go. There's your incorrect answer.
That's incorrect. It's
We
pumpkin.
can
We
fight
all
over
know
the
this.
pumpkin ale. So, but yeah, I love Pumpkinhead. And most of the time, it's just finding random stuff I've never drank before, and if I enjoy it, great. If I don't, fine. Like yourself, I'll throw back a High Life. That's fine.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but I want the wrong answers. I want, like, your top 3, but they're incorrect.
They're incorrect for me.
Yeah, so basically, I'm saying your
Oh,
top 3, but I want your worst 3.
got you. All right, so those would have to be a any coffee stout,
Dang,
uh, oh,
breaking my heart.
standard light beers like your Coors Light or your Miller Light. Those are beer flavored water.
Waste of
And then
calories.
let's see here. Yeah, well, yeah. Sometimes it's a meal in a can, especially when you're getting down on those stouts and there's porters. Another one I do not like, and I absolutely despise, are those chili beers. The ones with the chili peppers in them. Gross.
I've had a okay one from Stone, but they don't even make it anymore. Like, I think I was the only person who
But there's a
bought it.
reason why.
I'm pretty sure I'm
Probably.
pretty sure at least. Alright, cool. So alright, so I was honestly, I was expecting you to say Genovese, Bud Light, and Coors Light and call it quits, so that was that was pre that was pretty varied, I like it. Last random
Yeah.
question for you, and I'm giving you an option here. Alright. If you could make any JRPG party up to 4 characters, mix and match of any games, who would they be and why?
A party of 4 from any game. I think for a leader, I'm gonna have to go with Ichiban, from Like a Dragon. I love his charisma and the way he acts, and he always brings up the whole party. He's one of the perfect leaders for any JRPG party. Um, I would like to throw in, let's say, a thief. There's lots of really good choices, but I think I'll go with Locke from Final Fantasy VI.
Solid pick.
And then let's see here. I need a mage. Uh, this is a tough choice. Plenty of really good ones out there. Without taking too much time, though, I think I'll take Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. And for let's see here, a healer. Hmm, that's a tough choice. There's so many. I'm going through so many games in my mind, and I'm trying to think of a good healer that I would like to use. You know, screw that. We're gonna go mostly DPS. We'll sack the healer, and let's go with uh, an unpopular pick, but also popular at the same time. But let's throw in Gino from uh, Super Mario RPG.
Really? Okay. That's how I mean, Gino's pretty solid, but that's out of left field. That's like, didn't expect Mario RPG to
Yeah.
show up. Not even Malo. Come on. Awesome, awesome. Alright, so follow-up question to that then. In what game would they technically be in? In terms of, like, storyline, story arc, where would you see that party going?
Ooh. Hmm. I think I would like to make this odd. Give them a different world that they none of them would expect to be in. We could go into something like Shadowheart. That would be kind of interesting for those characters to dive into.
I think Ichiban would have a
Or like
heart attack, or his
I
imagination would
think you
run
would. I think you
wild.
would have a hard time. Um, but it would be really interesting to see those party members fight and have a good time. But I'm going to throw them in Octopath Traveler too. I
That would
think
be fun.
that would be fun with those characters.
That would be fun with those characters in that battle system for sure,
Hmm.
and having Ichiban just scream all over the place.
Yes.
Alright, so wow, that was really good, I like that. That now it's making me think. But, moving on to our topic today, so working designs. So you just finished up the gaming part, or rather the game part of your working designs collection, and now you're working on the odds and ends stuff. Um, what are some of the items that you're still trying to get or working on? I know you do a whole working designs collecting series, so if you'd rather be vague, that's perfectly cool, but is the end in sight?
I, I doubt it. There's so much stuff that Working Designs did, and they really prided themselves on making a lot of merchandise for their games and their brand and stuff like that. And something that I'm constantly looking for and rarely find is that mail order stuff that they that you could buy when you bought a game and it gave you that little pamphlet. You can order shirts and hats and watches and pins and stuff like that. I never ever have seen one of the watches they made ever on like anywhere. I've scoured the internet. I've never seen somebody who ordered a watch from them to have that. To find one of those would be amazing. Any of the shirts, I've seen a couple shirts for sale, and they're usually lunar. And but those guys who are selling them know what they got, and they're like $800, and I'm like, I'm not paying $800 for a shirt that probably won't fit. But yeah, it's the collectibles, like the cool little countertop standees that they made for all their games are would be really cool. I have one of them. I've seen others, but people ask too much and they just stay there for sale for way too much. Um, some of the promo items, especially with the Arc the Lad collection, uh, they did like what's it, 40 something watches, those pocket watches
Yes, they
that they
did.
made for all the characters. I have a handful of them, but sometimes they're too expensive, and when I catch them when they're cheap and it's not one I have, maybe I'll pick it up. But and I love enamel pins, so whenever I see the pins, I try to snag those too, but few and far between.
So here's a question for you. So the working designs collecting, is that originally geared by nostalgia? Is that geared by collecting and liking the genres of games that they made? Like how did you come about to discover working designs? Because for me personally, I literally came across Lunar at Blockbuster with my uncle, and the only reason why I even picked up the game, truthfully, was because one of the characters is named Alex. That was literally the only thing that got me to even notice this game. And that was purely the only reason why my uncle bought the game because it's like, hey, his name is Alex and he's the hero and you're Alex. And, Christmas comes, I get it. And I immediately am completely not turned off because at that point I'd played Final Fantasy 2, but I was so in awe and confused at the same time because it was so much more complex than, your typical like, I'm a knight and everything else. Now we're starting from ground zero as a child coming into his own and this huge coming of age story and legends and everything else. And I personally fell in love with that game. And then I went down a rabbit hole, truthfully, because of this little strategy guide my uncle got me. Because there's an interview with Victor Ireland in the back, and he's talking about things I'd never heard of. He's mentioning TurboGrafx 16 PC Engine. No idea what that was at the time, you know? And there's mentions of other games I'd never heard of. And then eventually I started to look for that Working Designs logo on Sega CD games. And that's when, Lunar 2 and everything else, and the game we'll eventually talk about. But what about you?
Mine started with really when I became a later teenager. So when I was about 16 is when I really started to discover what JRPGs were. So we're talking mid to late 90s.
Mhm.
And I worked at a Wendy's when I was in high school. And I worked there with just my buddies and a couple other guys who went to like other high schools and stuff. And I met a guy there who was huge into JRPGs and kept suggesting all these games. And matter of fact, he was a big influence on me to the point where I used my first paycheck. I went to a used video game store and bought myself a PlayStation 1 and Final Fantasy 7. Um, After that, I played all kinds of other RPGs because I really liked that. And I had friends who loaned me stuff like some of the Super Nintendo stuff that nobody cared about anymore at that time. But I played like your Earthbound, your Final Fantasy 6, Chrono Trigger, all that stuff. And I really was getting into it. So after I beat Final Fantasy 7, I asked the same guy, I was like, what game should I get next? And he was like, you go to the store and buy a copy of Lunar Silver Star Story Complete for the PlayStation. I was like, okay. So, I went there. It was only $50. You got that big, beautiful box with that
Wow.
hardbound book and, the little stickers for your memory cards and stuff like that. And I was reading through that book because I was really engaged. It was fantastic. One of the best manuals ever. And I played through that game. I think I finished that in probably a good 5, 6 days. It's not terribly long RPG to begin with, but loved it. And I was like, wow, this is what Working Designs puts together. Look at all this love and care they put into their packaging and stuff. So after that, I started picking up a few titles here and there, um, but wasn't really aware of their stuff before the PlayStation at that time, like their Sega CD stuff and their Turbo stuff. So it wasn't until I started doing YouTube and talking to a lot of YouTubers, especially in the early days when, those guys weren't very big, and I could talk to people like Johnny from Happy Console Gamer. I could talk to Pete Dorr, when they would actually, answer your comments for the most part and stuff like that. And I found a guy who really influenced me, goes by the name of Splatter
Oh,
Trigger.
from the glorious days
Um,
of the YouTube gaming community.
the glorious days of YouTube gaming. Um, and he was the biggest Working Designs fan, and he showed all the stuff, and I really made me appreciate the attention to detail that Working Designs put into their releases, which really impressed me. It wasn't necessarily that all those games were great by any means. It was just I liked the love and care they put into their releases. And it wasn't until much later because, by that time, Working Designs was getting expensive. It was starting to already get expensive. So it would take me a long time before I got in a place in my career to where I could afford to put substantial money into a video game, and stuff like that to where I was like, you know what? I've saved up quite a bit of money. I really always wanted a complete Working Designs collection. I'm going to start working on that. So that's how that all happened.
Yeah, I think, because for me, I started at the Sega CD. I started, like, the ground floor with Lunar, and I got Lunar 2, and then the next game I picked up from them, ironically, was Albert Odyssey on the Sega CD. Never touched Popful Mail, never touched the game we're talking about today. Um, didn't touch Iron Storm, didn't touch Sega Ages. I literally just had Albert Odyssey, and as I confirm on my shelf, Dragon Force. And then I skipped right ahead to Lunar Silver Star Complete, Eternal Blue Complete, Arc the Lad, and Thunder Force 5, which is
Yeah.
good, but the Saturn version's better, but it was cheaper to get the US version, right? Like all this stupid silliness. But being the 90s, one of the things like I kind of laugh because, as of today, we complain about limited run games and how long it takes them to release anything. You ain't seen nothing until you saw the release schedule for a Working Designs game. It would literally just say 1990X. They wouldn't even give you a year because of all that love and attention they put into a game. I think when my uncle came home with Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, like I've been waiting. Literally, I was just waiting for this game to show up. I had no idea when it was coming out, and we don't have the internet like we do today. I sent an email to Working Designs back in the late 90s on AOL, just saying, I play your
Mm.
games and I think they're cool. And I don't know who replied, but they said, thanks. And that was it. No smiley face, no emoji because nobody knew what that was. No
Yeah.
signature, no contact information, no, external email warnings or anything. Very like grassroots from like that was it. And it's wild for me to think back at that because it was so much more simple. But when you look into the history of Working Designs, and they had a pretty tumultuous like game development cycle because Vic Ireland literally wanted to bring stuff over that nobody else would. And then he also
Mm.
wanted to put his own spin on it, which whether you like it or hate it, Working Designs is known for their localizations with a lot of humor that
Mhm.
honestly probably wouldn't fly today. Um, but if you grew up in the 90s, it's a weird sort of endearing and kind of eye-rolling thing at the same time. So, I don't know if the collectability has a part in that or if it's more so geared towards nostalgia. For me, it's geared towards nostalgia. For you, it's more so it sounds like more so of a discovery of something like really cool and you want more of it.
Yeah. I'd say it's kinda a little bit of both because, like, my history I forgot to mention, though, that also with my friends, we also played a ton of Dragon Force when it came out as well. So it would mostly be stemmed from Dragon Force and Lunar as far as nostalgia factors go. Everything else is just an appreciation for that art that they put forth.
So based on the price of like your typical working design scheme these days, and you're going for a full set, so obviously you're geared a little bit differently than I am, like just inherently. Would you say a lot of their games are worth that price by gameplay alone, or do you think it is more so what the history is? And I'm going to use Sega Ages as an example because I know that was the bane of your existence for like the longest time.
Um, no. Gameplay alone, I don't think will sell, honestly, any of these titles for the price they're going for. Even your cheapest ones like, Silver Star Story Complete on the PlayStation, which is you could probably get for 120 bucks. Uh, I don't think it's worth that much. Really, I do not see value there in the gameplay. Dragon Force is kinda unique in with how many times you can play through that game and get a completely different,
Mhm.
story and ending with it. So that might come close, but even when that game's pushing $300, that's still tough to justify that. So no, I think it just has to do with the appreciation of the art and what that company did for gaming, really, and how that, like, if you take care of your products, it shows. And it obviously did because it created a lasting legacy for the company. Unfortunately, they folded.
Yeah, and I think the packaging and that attention to detail ultimately is what did them in, amongst other things. I know with Growlancer Generations, they originally wanted to do it as two releases, and Sony, I think, forced them to make it into one. So they literally lost, we'll say, $50 per game worth of revenue. So basically, they made $100 game 50 bucks, and like that ultimately did it in. I think they had a disagreement with Sega as well. But the odd thing is they actually started out making like accounting software,
Mhm.
which I
Yeah.
was like, how does that happen? And arts and craft, not arts and craft, show and tell time. In this book, referencing this book once again, as I've done 1,000 times on my channel, um, Vic actually says how this whole thing happened. Literally, the accounting software was doing its own thing. He was interested in video games, and he was buddies with a programmer that had left the company or retired or passed away, and was like, "Hey, why don't we try doing like game localization?" And the co-founder was like, "Sure, why not? Let's try it." It's another avenue of revenue, and that's
Mhm.
literally how it started with the PC Engine. And they only went with the PC Engine because he thought it had cooler games than the Mega Drive, which is really funny when you consider what they localized, Kadash, Exile, like games that came out over here, Cosmic Fantasy, games that came out over here that are known now, but weren't known back then. But the one quote that he does have here, talking about the Sega CD, that I thought was kind of telling based on where Working Designs is today. Basically, the interviewer asks, like, why did you choose Lunar as your first Sega CD title? And Vic says, I looked at 3 or 4 RPGs before Lunar. It was by far the best, and I didn't know anything about it. Although I'd heard people talking about it, I looked in a Japanese magazine and saw that it was ranked as the #1 RPG of all time. We heard rumors that the big Sega software manufacturers had tried to license it but couldn't get the deal made. I was wondering why not. And it turns out the president of Game Arts, and I know this is going to sound egotistical, he thought we were the only ones who could do it right, which is funny and not funny at the same time because Vic Ireland is literally the reason why these games aren't remastered because he won't sell the rights for the localization. And that's why it is not on the Genesis Mini 2, but it is in Japan. because he would not give Sega the rights to the localizations for Lunar
Yep.
and Eternal Blue. So the company folds, and he's sitting on a gold mine of stuff, and I don't understand why. And I do think that is partially why a lot of these games are as expensive as they are. I mean, true, we have Vanguard Bandits on PSN. You know, we have the Albert Odyssey games, not Albert Odyssey. I'm sorry, Arc the Lad. But you can't get Lunar Complete remaster. You can't. You have to rely on an Xseed translation, which I tried and couldn't stand it. I didn't like the new art design. I didn't like anything about it. And mind you, I have rose tinted glasses, but a lot of people who've played it are like, wow, this game's great. Then they play the working designs version and they're completely thrown back because they changed the script a lot. They changed the way, for better or for worse, women are talked about a lot. There's a lot of topical humor that people may not have been born for at the time. You know, everybody always cracks a joke about the Bill Clinton jokes. Some people don't even know who he is at this point. They're like, "Oh, the old guy." And it's like, "No, there was he was a president, you know, like there's a lot of stuff there." But it's so wild for me having grown up with that, and you grew up with that too. It's like I look back at all that stuff and I'm like, it was contemporary and it was funny and it made sense at the time because it was juvenile humor, but it was being told by presumably a 45-year-old man, which is kind of odd considering I still laugh at these jokes as a 40-year-old man myself, but you know, it is what it is.
Mhm.
The other thing that I thought was kind of telling as well, in Popful Mail, one of the bosses is literally voiced as Arnold Schwarzenegger, which he hasn't acted in years. So somebody coming in today may not even get the reference unless, you know, they know Arnold movies at this point, you know? Um, so it to me, it's kind of like they're a product of the time, which may be why nobody will try to pay an outlandish fee, which I imagine he's waiting for to get these localizations so they can get remastered and re-released through your limited run games and whatnot. Because that Cosmic Star Fantasy collection, that's a new translation completely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they couldn't get the rights. Same thing for the Lunar Touch. That's a new localization. The They remaster on iOS and PC. That's a new localization, as you know. Um, and it's purely because of Vic Ireland. And I know he's sold some stuff in the past, like, you know, promotional stuff through his own personal eBay, and people thought he was hard up for money. But, you know, he founded Gaijin Works, which I think, truthfully, in hindsight, was maybe just to renew licenses for the sake of keeping them. Because they did how many games? I think two.
I think they did, yeah, 2, maybe 3, but it was all one same series, and some people thought, "Oh, well, he created Gaijin Works, so maybe he could try to re-release some games too as well," but that never came to fruition. That's why I don't think we've seen another good Lunar re-release or anything else.
I think he owned the rights to Tumba at one point, I think. Because
He might have, and
I remember seeing Gaijin Works on that, but I saw this interesting article the other day, and I wanted to ask you about this because I know it's a big game for you. So Lunar was made by Game Arts, right? Grandia was also made by Game Arts. Gung Ho bought the rights to Grandia, and how many times have they re-released it?
how many times did Gung Ho re-release it?
Yeah,
Let's see here. Well, they did their initial release on the Switch, and I believe the PC as well. But I can't remember. But I remember them doing the re-release on the Switch, and everybody was who were fans were pretty excited. Who's this company Gung Ho? Well, they're giving us HD Grandia. You know, the only other way we could also play it was re-released on the PlayStation Network store, but that was just the regular PS1 version of the game. So Gung Ho released us that HD version, and then forever they talked. They were like, "No, we're that's it. We're not. That's all we're going to do with Grandia. We don't want to go through the trouble of reworking frame rates and resolutions to re-release it on any other platform except for the Switch." And then what was it? 2 years later, all of a sudden, here's the PlayStation version of Grandia HD collection. So, as far as I know, they've only released it twice, maybe three times, because I'm not sure if it's on PC or not. It might be.
So Grandia is so the HD remaster is on PC at this point, Switch, PS4, and Xbox.
Okay, they go to Xbox as well.
And honestly, and this is going to sound, capitalist pig nonsense. It's money. It's free money. I own Grandia literally 5 times. I own it on
Mm,
PS1, PSN, two versions of the HD remaster. That's four, and I have it on PC. I don't understand why Vic Ireland doesn't see that same thing. Fork out a couple of
I
thousand
don't
dollars to do
either.
an AI upscale, throw it on Steam, and just let the money come in, and let people enjoy these games for what they're worth, depending on how you look at it. Because
I wonder if he wants to keep the legacy of working designs there. This is the only way you could have enjoyed those games was back in my heyday.
but then we get into a preservation conversation, you know? And a lot of those tchotchke things are eventually going to break down. And knock on wood, eventually the discs are going to rot, especially, when you think about the Saturn and the Sega CD. I That's why I use EverDrives as much as I do, because I just don't know what's going to happen, you know? And
Hmm.
even for the game today, I know you had some technical challenges. I had some technical challenges, and we both had to think of different ways to go about it. And I think
Hmm.
as much as I appreciate the legacy of working designs, I feel like it it's a legacy because it can't move forward, if that makes sense, as opposed to something that could be celebrated. Because I mean, people look back at the localizations, and if you're a purist, that's perfectly fine, right? Some people rather have a literal translation. I know I saw nothing wrong with the Persona 5 localization. People had problems with it because they said it wasn't literal. And I don't speak Japanese, but some stuff, when you translate it literally, doesn't make sense unless it's
Hmm.
localized. Working Designs took that and they went somewhere completely different with a lot of it. But again, they were trying to be lighthearted and funny, you know? And I think that's where the '90s was. It was kind of like it was like SNL. SNL was good back then, That's kind of the vibe they were going for, I feel, as opposed to today.
So it sounds like just stubborn old man trying to hold on to his stuff and doesn't want to make money off of rights or release his copyrights to for purchase. I know there's been a handful of companies who've tried to purchase multiple uh, licensing rights from him to do like especially Lunar, and he's turned them all down.
So let's say, for instance, he I don't wish ill on anybody, but let's say he's hard up for money. He decides I'm going to sell the rights to everything, and it goes to limited run games. For instance, I'm using limited run games not because I have a dislike of them, it's because they release games at the same speed that Working Designs did back in the day. That is purely or strictly limited. We could do that too. Um,
Yeah, but Limited Run has that one engine they use to help remaster or re-release stuff that could be helpful in this situation.
But if they also did a special edition, I have no doubt they would do it to the same level, hopefully, that a Working Designs would with all the extra tchotchkes and stuff. Now, will it be on a burned disk or maybe a blank USB drive? I don't know. But I think they would do justice to that part for the nostalgia factor. That being said, would you rebuy all of them or only key titles?
Oh, I think it would have to be key titles unless they did some collection work stuff. Like if they did working designs, turbo graphics collection. Oh, okay, I'll buy that. You know, there's still a few games on the turbo graphics um, working designs library that I'd like to play. But yeah, I think I would more stick to key titles that were my favorites, your Lunars, your Dragon Force, Albert Odyssey, stuff like that that I really enjoyed playing that I would probably focus on, but I don't think I'd buy them all. That would just be another rabbit hole of horribly expensive limited editions I'd have to buy.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me with the SNK shock boxes. Because I love Neo Geo and I have all those shock boxes. And I'll be honest, they're all sealed because I have all those games digitally or on the PS2. And it's stupid. It is inherently stupid. And I had somebody recently ask me how many games are in my physical collection. I had no problems giving them a number. But I was thinking, how many of these are duplicates and triplicates and quadruplicates? Like because of silliness like that, you know? Um, and it's not even like a FOMO thing. It's like I would argue the collecting goes nostalgia, passion, and just a want to not miss out for me. You know, the FOMO is the last part of it. But if it's SNK, I'm like, oh, I gotta do it. SNK.
Yeah, that's me with the like the little RPGs. Well, what kind of RPG is that? As long as it's not a Kimco piece of crap. All right,
Some
yeah,
people like
I'll
those,
probably buy
man.
it.
Some people have all of
I
them, and
played
I'm
through a
like,
few of them.
I can't figure it out. But I mean, even like I love the Sega CD. And my Sega CD collection, like I primarily like obviously I have the working design stuff, but there's a lot of stuff on there too that I would like to have, but because of the way those games are designed, I want the cases, I want the boxes, but I'm not going to spend, $300 on Time Gal in box because it ends in 20 minutes, you know?
Nope,
Revenge of the Ninja,
nope.
$30, sure. Um, But by that same token, we have the Ray's Arcade collection now. So I obviously don't have my working designs shooter games anymore because honestly, the collection is better because Vic, another thing he used to do is he would tweak games because he
Hmm.
felt like maybe they were too easy. I have no idea why. Most famously in Eternal Blue, you had to spend MP to save. I don't know why. So that being said, let's talk about the game du jour, Vi, on the Sega CD. Literally one of the last working designs games I bought. I see I have mine prepared too.
Excellent.
So how did you end up purchasing yours?
Um, Vi was actually one of my first purchases of a working design. It's actually when I first got into seriously starting collecting more video games because, the expendable income came in. So I bought that a long time ago, probably I'd say 2011, 2012.
Oh wow.
And I was at a local game store up in Denver. And I went in there and I saw that sitting there and I was like, "Oh, working designs, I kind of want that." I was like, "How much?" He's like, "It's missing the map." I was like, "Okay." At the time, I didn't care, and I was like, "How much?" He's like, $50. I was like, "Sure." So that's how I got my copy. And I had never really played or heard of Vi. It was the Working Designs logo that sold me on it. I was like, I don't even have a Sega CD yet, but I want to pick this up because eventually I'll have some way to play this. So that's how I got it.
Yeah, I just remember seeing not even ads for it. I just remember seeing it software, etc. And honestly, I mean, I thought the cover art looked cool.
Yeah.
The back doesn't sell anything whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
It's a literal wall of text and 3 little pictures, and they look like they were literally like a camera that was pointed at the TV. Um,
Yeah, they were poor pictures.
and at the time, cover art is what sold a game. So as much as this cover looked cool, the back, I was just like, "No." I was spoiled by seeing all the anime stuff from Lunar and everything else because that was starting to come out over here, and I was actually discovering I really enjoyed anime, like, around that 1994 time frame. That's when Cartoon Network started to show it. So the fact that Vay didn't have any of that on there, I completely overlooked it. And coming into playing it for this particular episode, I'm not gonna say it, but I wish I played this sooner. But how we ended up playing this, you and I both have a different story going in here. Because as these things go, I present a bunch of stuff from my backlog, and I usually let the guests pick one that they haven't played as well, but you have to own it in one way, shape, or form. And Fox here literally just went, "Ooh, I haven't played that yet." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm finally gonna play it, considering I've had this in my collection just as long as you have." And never looked at it other than me realizing that the manual was falling apart and buying a replacement because it made me upset. Um,
Hmm.
but the interesting thing is, with the way technology is today, if Vic ain't gonna preserve it, the internet will, you know? So,
Yep.
how did you end up playing this game?
It was pretty interesting. So I was looking into it. I was like, okay, well, at first I was like, let me hook up the Sega CD. Let me just play this original. So, and I had a hell of a time doing it because one of my Sega Genesis Model 2s died, apparently, because I was hooking it up. I was like, why isn't this sucker working? And it wasn't, it was the Model 2. It croaked. I was like, okay, that's no big deal. Let me find another one in my closet of consoles here. And I hooked up like a Model 1, but it wasn't fitting where I wanted it, but it worked. And I was like, okay. So I popped in Vay and I was playing through and I got maybe 20 minutes into the game and it crashed. And I was like, damn it. So I did it again and it was crashing semi frequently. Now, I don't think it was a disk rot issue. It could have been, I don't know. And so I was looking at other ways to play, and I know they did an iPhone port way long ago, like over a decade ago. And I was like, I don't know about that. So I was searching online and I was like, oh, 3 days ago, they released a new port to Steam. So I was like, all right, that's the way we're gonna do it. $7 to Steam, and that's how I'm gonna play it.
And that was with a new localization and everything else.
Yes, and they decided to use a mix of the different character names because characters had different names in different regions that the game was released. And as I was like looking at the character names and I was looking at my book and stuff like that, because I kind of wanted to go with a guide just a little bit like the old guide to see. And I was like, this isn't the name of these characters. And I went on and was searching. And I was like, oh, this was a name, but it wasn't in the US. That wasn't what they were named. And it was also with the cities and stuff too. So it made it a little confusing as I was reading through the book while I played the game. But luckily, the Steam version allows you to go into the settings and change the character names.
Oh, very
So
cool.
I changed them to the original US names.
Did it have anime cutscenes, or they have to take those out?
Nope, they had all the original anime cutscenes, and as horrible frame rate as they were, but I still loved the art style of this anime uh, art that they did for Vey. I really appreciated the way the characters were drawn and the way they looked, but the cutscenes were fun, choppy cinematics.
And they had different voice actors. How was the voice acting? Because mine's pretty bad.
Oh, it was horrible. It screamed early 1990s voice acting in early CD games. It was it was laughable. I'll say that.
I think for me, the one that did me in was what was it? I think it's PJ when she see which I didn't realize was a girl until I saw the cutscene. I was like, "Oh, PJ's a girl. Okay." I had no idea. And she literally sees the main character and she goes, "Aroo, is he hot?" And I was like, like she's
Oh
literally
man.
making like, like the Tex Avery, "Aruga, aruga" sounds when she sees him. I'm like,
Yeah.
"What is this?" Like, so I don't know
Oh
if that came
man.
across in your version or not, because I was kind of not put off by it, but I was kinda shocked, but I was like, it's working designs."
Yes. Another thing I do have to say about this new translation was they took some tried to be very uh, working designs as they could with modern translations of fitting different type of lines that would seem funny to today's audiences. I believe I sent you a picture of one where they were doing a DBZ reference
Yeah.
in there, and I was like, "Huh, okay." They're trying to be funny, but I'm sure there's plenty of differences between the was it 93 release for
Yeah,
the
90
Working Designs one?
yeah, 93, 94. I mean, one
I'm
of
sure there was some big translation differences on especially where they took their liberties of trying to be funny.
well, like that over 9,000 part you were in, I can't remember exactly, but if you look at the screenshot you sent me, it does look like something else, and one of the characters points that out. Um, basically just saying, "This looks like some place I've never seen before," and I was like, "Oh my." And there's another one where somebody was like, "Wow, she has a nice pair of bazungas." I was like, "OMG, come on." So,
Yep. That they still rolled with that in the new one too.
okay, there you go. So you
They
played a brand new translation. What I ended up doing was I originally was gonna try to play it on the Sega CD, but I have a Retroid Pocket 4, which I had purchased some time ago, and, this plays everything up to the GameCube and PS2, with some limitations depending on the game. Sega CD, it runs no problem, and, me purely deciding to play this, I was like, "I'll just play it handheld." I would much rather do that than unhook a bunch of stuff and take over the TV to have my wife look at the TV like this the whole time, being like, "He's just running in circles. He's just running in circles and killing the same monsters over and over again because he has to grind for these
Mhm.
bosses, which are all skill checks because Vic decided in his infinite wisdom to up everything's HP by 1,000%. So, by the joys of the internet, I found a patch that was literally called the Unworking Designs Patch Battle System. It kept the localization and it reverted all the HP, all the XP calculations, all the gold drops, and everything else back to the original Japanese settings. So you would not have seen this because you played a completely different version. But the instance where you have to pay off that bar tab, it
Mhm.
was 50,000 gold as opposed to 5,000 gold.
It was even cheaper in this version.
How much was it?
It was only 1,000 gold.
Really?
And what was funny, in the book, it says it was 10,000.
Yeah, no, it was supposed to be 50.
Yeah.
I mean, I had it because I over grinded and over leveled, but I was like, "Oh, no, no, if I got to this part, like, as Alex today, who sees annoying things like this and just goes, 'Fuck this, I'm done. I'll just YouTube the ending.'" Um, that I that totally would have happened. Um, but the final boss, I think he upped the HP for him too, because for me, it was a little touch and go at points because I was truthfully working against the RNG at that point
Mm.
because what's the name of the mage again? Was it Kellen?
Salador? Oh, no, our party. What was his name?
But maybe it was
The mate,
PJ. Maybe it was PJ.
PJ was, but spoilers, something happens to PJ. I believe he ended up using, was it Lynx? Lynx was the
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of, the one that has a whip.
yeah, a bard. He was the musician kinda guy, but he was a mage.
Yeah, so, like, there was, basically, I had to look up a walkthrough for the final boss, so I was like, "I'm doing something wrong." And literally, it just says, "Just cast this spell over and over again, and just hope the RNG doesn't work against you, and he'll fall down." And literally, that's exactly what happened. The battle ended in 5 minutes because I got
Nice.
lucky on the RNG. And I was like, "Okay." And then we saw the ending, and I was like, "Okay, it is what it is." But overall, what'd you think of the game, though? Like, I mean,
Uh,
you played a very different version, a little bit more modernized, but if you were to strip that away, do you think you would have been able to get through it?
yeah, I think so. I It wasn't too bad, honestly. I kinda expected it to be worse than it was because nobody really praises the game. So I went in with really low expectations, but I thought it was fine for an early '90s JRPG. I liked the characters for what they were. The story was very straightforward. Uh, the grinding was a little bit much, even for this version. You still kind of needed to grind a little bit, and it got to the point where I was at the final dungeon. And thankfully, this new port uh, gave us the option to significantly give yourself more XP, which I
Such a cheater.
took advantage of before I went into that final dungeon because that final dungeon was actually a mazy slog. I didn't
It
really
was.
enjoy
It
that
really
too much.
was. I was like, "I hate stuff like this." It's a maze for the purpose of being a maze.
I was like, all of this is in that tiny ass castle.
It was, I mean, story-wise, to your point, it's like it it creates itself as this big grandiose thing, but it's really not because it's so breezy. It's kinda like, "Oh, we gotta do this thing," and then you go and you do that. It's like, "Okay, now we gotta go do that thing." It's like, "Okay," and it's like, "Now we have to go kill this thing." It's like, "Okay," and then you get this mystic armor because RPG, and then
Yep.
you outlevel it anyway, so it's like, why give you the mystic armor?
Yeah. I was like, I could have beat this guy without this armor.
Pretty much, but I think, it was refreshing for me because it was so 90s, and
Hmm.
I was actually very happy you picked this game because as we get older, I know these older games are gonna get more and more difficult for us to play just because of quality of life and everything else, and I know you have an
Hmm.
exceptionally high tolerance for retro stuff like I do, but if I got stuck with that 50,000 gold thing, I would have put the Retroid down, just said, I'm out." Like,
Oh, yeah. I was expecting it because, like, the book was like, "Oh, it's 10,000." I was like, "Shit. All right. I guess I'll go grind for a little bit." And I was like, "I don't really want to grind, but we'll see." And then I went over there. It's like $1,000. I was like, "Oh, all right. Here we go." I guess they fixed that problem in this port.
yeah, one thing I did notice, you can't fully upgrade everybody's armor either. Like, you never make enough money to do that, or at least I didn't.
No, it came to a point where I was like, okay, so I see how this is going to be. Armor is very expensive in this game, so I was like, it's going to be an every other town thing for me to upgrade. I was like, I got to save money and then I'll do it at the next town because it's very JRPG trope. Go to a new town, you get new gear, you talk to new people, you do the next branch of the next quest or whatever you're going to do. So I was like, okay, there's going to be another town, so I'll just wait till I get to the next town and then I'll buy more.
Yeah, I focused on weapons. Like, I pretty much be like, "Okay, we're going pain making. Like, I'm not gonna live, but if I kill them before they kill me, I'm good to go."
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think other than the final boss, I only got a game over once. Like, the game is actually really easy as long as you're prepared to grind, but did you have an auto run thing? Because at least in this version, you could speed up, like, naturally the running.
Yes.
Okay,
No, I fished through all the settings just to see what was available in this port. And I saw, the difficulty reducing, which is pretty much more XP or more gold or something like that. And I saw down there, auto run. Oh, that's on right now.
Yeah, because
so I can run as fast as I can through the maps and the cities and the dungeons.
and, the Sega CD version also had a glitch, which they didn't fix in this. The, world music would reset every time you exited a battle. So I never actually heard all of the music for the world map throughout my entire
Oh,
playthrough.
me neither. They kept that in
Oh, they
this
did?
new port. Yeah,
So what'd you think of the battle music, though?
that wasn't bad.
I loved it.
Uh, I thought it was pretty. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. You know, I was like, there wasn't many tracks in this game where I thought, eh, this sucks. This is like really old, like very bad chip tune style music. I was nah. This was pretty enjoyable. I thought the soundtrack was probably really good for its time.
Man, I was rocking out to it before we started recording. I mean, I really like the final boss music is awesome. And it's like,
Yes, it was.
I was like, it's really funny because my wife was like, because I had it on loop, and my wife is like, "How long is this song?" I was like, "It's the same riff over and over again." I found like an extended version on YouTube. It's like 8 hours long of just that. Dun, 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 dun. So, sorry. So she comes in and she's just like, "How long is this?" I was like, 8 hours, and she's like, "Oh my god." You're out of your mind. I was like, "Well, I played the game and I listened to this, I think I finished it in 15 hours, not even."
Oh no, and because I had this, I accelerated my final area dungeon, as I said. I think I finished it in about 11 hours. Going through, so it wasn't very long, and I can imagine back in the day if you played the original release, probably a good 15 to 20-hour game, depending on how long you had to grind.
I mean, it does have, like, a cult following. Like, after finishing it, I looked up a bunch of stuff, and apparently a lot of people love this game, and a lot of people hate this game, and I completely overlooked it as a kid. I completely overlooked it from a collecting perspective and a backlog reduction perspective. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I really do wish I played this earlier because is it I don't think it's the best RPG I've ever played, but it also didn't do anything wrong as
Oh,
far as I'm concerned.
no, it didn't do anything wrong. It was a solid RPG. It was enjoyable. So, yeah, I'd give it a thumbs up. I'd say, yeah, play it. Give it a shot. Especially if unless you're like some people who can't stand retro style games anymore. But if you are okay with retro gaming, I'd be like, yeah, play Vay.
But, I mean, I do feel like this is also like a little bit of like a weird cheaty thing because you played a more modern version. I played a
Mhm.
modified version because I was like, I ain't dealing with all this artificial difficulty crap. Um, but I think I'm gonna say it still counts because we ultimately got through it, right? But I almost wonder if we both played it on the Sega CD as it was, would we be so high on it now? Because for me, I
Well,
don't think I would be. I think I would have been completely turned off by some of the artificial difficulty stuff.
yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. There would have been the famous difficulty spike, especially with bosses, like you mentioned earlier.
Like
Um,
the weird like dragon worm elemental thing.
oh yeah,
The
yeah.
one that shoots lightning at you
Um,
randomly.
yes. Uh, yeah, I think I would have had a hard time because I would have been definitely been forced. I was like, okay, this is the way this game is going to be. I have to grind a lot, you know, at every area just to make sure I'm ready for whatever ridiculous stat boss I'm going to be fighting next. I think I wouldn't have been as high on it. Though I could have, I might have seen it as a decent challenge, but then I would have devoted more time to it. And if I'm gonna really focus on a game, then I'm a guy who can't play two games at once when it comes to that. So I would have had to put down whatever modern game I was playing, which was what was I playing most of the time? Trails through Daybreak. I would have to set that aside to focus on Vey and really play through it, and I would have said, "This game was hard." It took me a while. I had to do a lot of grinding.
So here's the flip side. So obviously this is a terrible example because it has received a modern iteration with some tweaks. But this is the same argument I'm making when it comes to the classic working design stuff too, right? If it were to get a more modern port that somehow preserves or keeps the localization intact, or at least the spirit of working designs intact, and not just rewrite it for the sake of being modern, I think it would be a good look, you know? Um, I mean, do I necessarily I think, and I'll use Lunar as an example because that's the one that holds close to my heart. If limited run games were to do a collection, Lunar 1 and Eternal Blue, which they would never do because they realize if they split it, they make more money. Um, if they did one where you could switch between the Sega CD version and the complete version and toggle between Saturn and PlayStation, making a definitive version like that, and with the ability to change between Japanese and the US settings, I think that would be the definitive way to play the game completely. And if
Yeah,
and and if they were able to do that with the entire back catalog, because Albert Odyssey is originally a Super Nintendo game. I this is where I say I can't figure out why this I'm sorry, Vic. This old man just wants to hold on to these things because he's literally sitting on a gold mine. I would buy all this all over again. As I said, I have stuff double, triple, and quadrupling it. I know you do too.
mhm.
We'd probably be at the next Midwest Gaming Classic together with matching games. Like it would just be like that, you know? And I can't
Yeah,
figure it out.
absolutely. No, I can't figure it out either. Because yeah, I'd be the same. Although with your theory, I think there would be a problem with having both versions of Lunar, because doesn't when Alex leaves on the boat, isn't in the CD version, she doesn't come with him, but in the complete version, she does come with him?
She does, and you get a music video.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah, the music video, the famous singing part.
You know, he wrote all those
You
songs.
Vic did?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
yeah.
That's interesting. Cool. I like
I,
okay, I gotta give him a little more credit.
the Sega CD intro is by far one of the to the original Silver Star. That song, growing up as a kid who was just discovering metal, but was still into synthesizers, was like the best thing I'd ever listened to in the longest time, and it is the cheesiest freaking thing in hindsight. But when I show people that intro, like, you know, like younger people I work with, I go, "This was cutting edge back then." They're like, "Oh my god, this song is awful." It's like, "What are you talking about, man? This is it. This is 1994 in a bottle."
Open your ears, man.
Yeah, open your ears. Wasn't all Nirvana and all those grunge guys. Like these were the hangers on from the 80s. But I mean, and that it's a little bit of the soundtrack in this too. It's a little 80s-ish, I think. But, you know, it's the power of
Mhm.
CD audio. And it's wild. It's actually wild to think about. Like if you read like the localization notes in the back of the V manual, like Vic is going on about like all the CDFX stuff they were able to do with this game. And I'm like, he's like, we have 60 CDs worth of data. I'm like, that's
Um,
nothing by today's day. It's so crazy to like go back and like that sort of time. But I don't know. I kind of wish there was I kind of wish there was a sequel to this too, though.
oh, they could have easily done a sequel to it. I'm surprised there wasn't one, not even in Japan, I don't think.
I mean, you get the armor again and just
Yeah,
rinse and repeat and do the whole thing all over again.
I but an interesting thing about that you mentioned the armor, I was you're led to believe that how viciously powerful and evil and world-ending this piece of armor is, that nobody should have it, that's why they locked it away, and then you just go and get it, put it on, and you're no, it was fine, it wasn't evil at all. It was cool. I used it to defeat evil.
I think it's kind of wacky as like to your point, they spell it out as this giant, like, world-ending mech, and it's literally just in a regular treasure chest. It's like, it's just I was
It's
like
just a suit.
I was like, "They didn't think this out well at all." Not well at all.
No, the ending was very abrupt and kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's like it literally is, "We saved the day. Let's get the hell out of here." And that's it. And
Yeah,
I was kinda like, the it kinda summarized itself, honestly, like a '90s anime. Like, it's like you write yourself into a corner, you try to wrap up every loose end within 30 minutes, and then you just end. And you're not satisfied at all, I guess. And I
yeah,
don't think you could be satisfied with this ending because not because it's abrupt, but because it's like the high stakes weren't really that high if you think about it, because it kind of resolved itself anyway. There's just one guy at the end was just like he was like, "I'm hanging on to this," and you're like, "No, no, you're not." Whap, and that's it.
yep.
But I mean, honestly, that this was a good pick. I'm really happy you picked this. I'm really happy I played it. I would play this again, honestly. I not immediately, but I don't think I mean, if any of these were ever to get re-released like through LRG, I think this would be the last one they would re-release. I think they would do like a Popful Mail first. Um,
Yeah, I could see the Popful Mail coming, some of the more beloved stuff, if he ever sold it, definitely Lunar, maybe some of the Sega Saturn stuff, but then again, we don't see a lot of re-release of anything Sega Saturn, unfortunately.
so actually, that brings up. So let's say, for instance, hypothetically, in this wacky world of 2025 onward, let's say a limited release company, not necessarily LRG, but anybody, were to pick up the rights to all of these games, and they were going to do retro reproductions with the original translations. They weren't going to touch them at all, kind of like they do with like those carts, like they do for Arrow the Acrobat and everything.
Yeah.
Do you think those would sell well? Or rather, A, would you buy them? And B, do you think they would sell well enough that this would reinvigorate game arts to like I mean, I mean, honestly, I think they sold the rights to Lunar to Exceed at this point. But do you think that would prompt more sequels in some of these older games, like a Dragon Force 3? Because we never got two of 'em.
Ooh. So, number 1, yes, I would buy them all because they would be my backups, or I would just play those
Mhm.
instead because, like you said, aging technology, aging media, it who knows if it'll keep working. So, being able to give me a new version of the same thing, hell yeah. I'd buy that up in a heartbeat. Um, Now revitalizing these games or series, I think some definitely would. I think there's already a clamoring for more Lunar. Where the hell is Lunar 3 or something like that? Let's see some more stuff in the Lunar world. I could see that being like Game Arts being like, okay, this is still selling and people want it, so let's go ahead and see what we can write up for a Lunar 3. Um, uh, the tactical and strategy fans out there, they seem to be pretty strong right now, at least, because there's been so much tactical and strategy game releases in the last few years that people have been really enjoying them, and I could see maybe a Dragon Force 3 coming out. Um, is Ark of the Lad still around? I don't
It
know.
came back and it left, so I couldn't even tell
Yeah,
you.
it can't, yeah. So maybe Ark the Lad, stuff like that. What's the last Thunder Force game? Would we get another Thunder Force?
There is a
I
6th,
don't know.
which is Japano.
There's a thing. Oh, okay. So maybe they would be like, oh man, Thunder Force 5 sold like hotcakes. Okay, well let's port over Thunder Force 6, and get us some more Thunder Force, some more shooters that people like. I don't know. I could see it. working. It'll definitely make money because I think plenty of people would like to the opportunity to get into these games that they've heard so much stuff about, but were just realistically not feasible to buy because there was no favorable port for any of those games,
Yeah.
especially the Sega Saturn stuff. So I could see that selling actually quite a few copies. Yeah, I think I would love that for all that to happen.
Yeah, and I think some of them, like Magic Knight Ray Earth, is like a perfect storm of a limited release because A, it's an IP, it's an anime, it's a manga, it's also Clamp, the Sailor Moon team and all that stuff. It came out towards the end of the Sega Saturn's life because it took Working Design so long to put it out. Nobody bought it, and the people who did buy it bought it only because they knew what it was. And I was waiting for that to come out for so long because I watched Sailor Moon, I really enjoyed it. I'd never heard of Magic Knight Earth, but I had a friend who knew about it. It came out and I'd moved on and forgot completely about it. And the only reason why I have my copy is because that same friend at the time I was collecting was like, "Here, I'll sell it to you for a song," you know, compared to what it was going for at the time, which was about $300. And I got it. I think I gave him 85 bucks and a six pack, and we called it quits. And I still have it. I'll never get rid of it, you know? Um, the only time I already told him, I said the only time that this game would be sold is if something happens to me because I told Katie something happens to me. And I literally every time I point to the Saturn collection, I go, that will take care of everything. Just those are the ones. Those will take care of everything. Um, just because of the nature of it. And I think it's unfortunate too, because I know a bunch of people who played that game and they're like, is it the best action RPG? No, but it's really freaking fun. And I think that's where gameplay is paramount, you know? Um,
Yeah,
I think Alundra is the best Zelda game ever made. I'll put my hands in the air and just say that out loud. But they tweaked the difficulty to it. They made it harder. I didn't know that until after I beat it and was like, wow, this was so hard. But truthfully, I do think it's one of the best Zelda games ever made, honestly. It's
yeah,
it's really solid. I mean, I've always said I'd love to see Alundra and Link in a vicious knife fight, and I think Alundra would win, to be honest.
uh, yeah,
But it's
yeah.
it's a hard game. Um, but all that being said, I think like if I think I was really excited about that Cosmic Fantasy collection until I found out it was a new localization. That kind of put a damper on it, and I'm still waiting for BGP to get it in stock because I didn't want to wait forever for it. I don't even know if it came out yet physically.
It did.
Oh,
Yeah, I have it.
did you get the fancy or no?
The what?
Did you get the fancy edition or no?
Oh, no. I'm trying to be super, super selective on fancy, stupid editions. I was looking at all the stuff that came with it, and I was like, okay, okay, okay. And then I looked at the price that LRG was charging for it. I was like, nope, not worth that much. No thanks. I'll just take the standard edition. Thanks.
But then I'll argue you, but at the same time, you want all the watches for working.
Yeah, I do.
But you
Did
could
that
also
come with a
say that's why I
watch?
don't want the LRG thing. Is I have watches to buy.
That's true. Too many watches to buy, especially those video game related ones.
But I don't know. I think it's just interesting to see where these games came from. But who do you think is like the modern equivalent of working designs in terms of localizing at this point? I mean, they're wholly unique. There's no one for one.
Um, okay, so I used to think that was Xseed, and what's their partner? Marvelous.
Yeah.
Um, because the way they were releasing stuff, especially back on the PSP, and they were doing those new ports of like Eve. and what else did we get from them? That new Lunar Harmony, which was not great. Uh, but the way they were doing their packaging, it reminded me very much. I was like, "Oh, man, this very nice box with the foil covers and the raised lettering and stuff like that." I was like, man, this reminds me of Working Designs. Oh, cool. And they gave me a CD, with the soundtrack and stuff like that. I was like, oh, this must be the new Working Designs. And they kind of just pittered off, and they kind of, well, they're still releasing some stuff, but not very much like they used to. So now I kind of am looking towards, right now, I'd say probably NIS is probably the closest we're going to get to Working Designs, because I mean they do all their own translations there. Um, they give us some really nice, somewhat affordable special editions that come with lots of pretty nice trinkets and stuff like that in them. So yeah, so right now I'd say NIS is probably what closest we got.
So I would agree. As a Disgaea fan and as off the wall as Disgaea is, I saw a lot of the heart of Working Designs back in the day with those titles, like the zaniness, the fourth wall breaking. Like in the first Disgaea, there's literally a character that they all call mid boss because he was a mid boss, and the whole time he's like, "I'm not a mid boss. I'm a sub boss." Like he's just joking about all that. And I'm like, yeah, I could definitely see this as a Working Designs thing. But in terms of the packaging with the PSP stuff, yeah, like that definitely had Working Designs vibes going on. And then it kind of just stopped. I mean,
Yeah.
you have like East Salsetta and stuff like that where you can still see those roots in there. I'm talking about the Vita version. But I think
Mhm.
NIS has really kind of just taken over that at this point. Um,
Yeah, there's a few things they don't have. Like, it was what, real recently when NIS finally got rights to the first two Trails of Cold Steel, because Xseed held on to that for so long, and everybody was like, I kind of want, a a new version, a PS5 or Switch version of Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. But no, Xseed has that. We can't do that.
yeah,
And it was what, this year we finally got, you could get those versions for the Switch, PS5 and stuff.
it's such a weird legal thing. Like the way they split that up, I was just I mean, I'm not gonna say it's anti-consumer. I just think it's IP management. It's all weird. Um,
It is weird because the Xseed still has Ys Oath of Felgana,
yeah.
so we're getting that new remaster. Guess who's releasing it? It's not NIS, it's Xseed.
And some people would say XC does localizations better, which I agree, but I also think NIS has a particular vibe that serves a purpose. But if you ask me who does the best localizations in the business, it's A4 Studio, hands down. Like they do all the Fire Emblem stuff for Nintendo, and that's consistent throughout, even with their inside jokes, which are in every game.
Yeah,
And you don't
yeah,
know
that's
unless you
true.
know. Like there's always somebody goes, "Wow, you saved my bacon." Like there's always one person that says that. Just like in the
Yes.
Atelier game, somebody always screams barrel randomly. And I think it's like it's fun. It's not as over the top. It's not as, boisterous or flamboyant, but it's fun. And if you know, you know. Um, so yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But I also don't know if this is a fair question to ask, but what do you think is like, Lunar is obviously what Working Designs is known for the most. What do you think is the modern day?
Like a modern day Lunar?
Like, who do you think is like carrying that torch right now in terms of game franchise?
I don't know. What do you mean? Like, who's carrying the Lunar franchise,
No,
or
like in terms of so Lunar is like, that quintessential 90s coming of age traditional RPG, right? Lighthearted
okay.
game, lighthearted story, lovable characters, over the top plot. What game franchise do you think is that today in the 2000s?
Ooh, that's tough to say because specifically talk about, real good coming of age stories and lighthearted nature, just feel good stuff. Most of that's in the indie sector nowadays.
Yeah.
So a lot of those games are in the indie side. But as far as carrying a torch of a certain type of game is of what you expect you're going into, and even some a different type of coming of age, but more of like teenage to adult coming of age. I'd have to go more towards Atlas with like Persona. Um, it's definitely more like teenage coming into adulthood and all those type of issues that come along with that. And that's the best I could think of right now as far as that kind of feel. But yeah, the rest of it is a lot of these indie games or where some of that stuff is at with like especially like modern stuff like Chained Echoes and Sea of Stars.
Both of which I've done. I I honestly, and I don't think it's a perfect one for one, but I kind of go towards Xenoblade Chronicle, particularly 2 and 3
Okay.
in terms of that too.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely, especially with 2 and 3.
Yeah. One
3 was
one I mean
more
Shulk is the Highlander. Like he's my absolute favorite because he's out of his mind. But because he get did you play Future Perfect or Future Past Present or whatever, Future Tense or whatever it's called? The add-on to the
was that
definitive edition?
no, I have yet to re-dive into Xenoblade Chronicles 1.
Okay.
I want to, but it's a time sink, and I'm like, I gotta balance of which long ass RPG am I gonna play? And I know Xenoblade One's fairly long, but I really would like to play the definitive edition. Just trying to find the time to get into it. So no, I haven't played that.
'Cause Shulk is really good in the epilogue. Like, he has a moment where I was like, "This is why I love him." Like, especially at the end of 3, made me choke up a little bit. Um,
Oh, hey, yeah.
not in a bad
Ah,
way. I was just like, cause as a character, like, even back on the Wii, I thought, like, his growth is just so good, and as a character, he's incredibly overpowered, but he
oh yeah.
doesn't recognize it because he's smart. And, he kinda plays off "Oh, he's like a weak kid." Like, no, he's out of his mind. He's like Spider-Man with the way he
Yes,
bounces around and everything. It's insane.
so good.
And then as he gets older, it's like he just gets better. He doesn't get worse. So, like, playing through, like, Xenoblade, I saw a lot of, like, that coming of age stuff. I mean, and the other coming of age game I always fall back on is Final Fantasy X. Um,
Okay.
because you see how Edis, is ultimately just like a whiny teenager who just comes to grip with his shit. And, he has
Hmm.
daddy issues. And you could
Hmm.
argue Alex and Lunar kinda has daddy issues, kinda.
Yeah.
And Hero just has, love struck hero issues. Um, but it's all like teenage angsty stuff. And it's like I see a lot of that between those titles. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
but I would like to see these games come back in one way, shape, or 'cause I mean, they're dated. I have no doubt they're gonna offend people because, humor's definitely changed. Um,
Hmm.
but I think as, like, a timepiece in terms of preservation, everything else, I feel like everyone should at least experience these games once, whether legally or illegally, I personally don't care, you know?
I
Uh,
don't either. They're old enough where I'm like, just play it.
yeah. I think value is definitely a play, um, at the
Yeah,
end of
I'd give it a play.
cool
Hmm.
stuff.
Definitely play it.
All right. Well, so final thoughts, pretty much that sums up. We both think this was worth the time. We both didn't leave upset.
Hmm.
All right. So before we kick this off and get our asses out of here, I have 3 questions for you. These are a lot easier. 3 favorite things about this hobby besides playing video games.
Uh, that's easy. I'm a collector at nature. I try to limit what things I do collect, and I have a love for video games. So one of the biggest thing is just amassing a collection. What's another thing about this hobby that's not playing video games? Uh, Reading about it, the legend, the lore behind games, why they're made, and uh, kind of the history of said franchises or even modern games of the trials and tribulations that they came to make some of these games is great. And number three, ooh, this is going to be tough. Has to be the love for the music that comes with a lot of games. I'm a big soundtrack guy, and luckily for us, modern day video game soundtracks are getting absolutely amazing.
What was the first video game soundtrack you ever bought? I remember mine.
The first one I bought, Final Fantasy 9.
Final Fantasy VII was mine, and,
Okay,
I imported it from Japan after I beat Final Fantasy VII, and, I remember I had a math tutor at the time, and he came to the house, and my parents had a Bose sound system, like, throughout the living room, and he came into me blasting One Winged Angel, because of course, you know? Now I can't stand the
yeah,
song. But at the time, he was like, "What is this?" And I was so embarrassed of the video. It was like like but for me, it was just because it was so bombastic, and at that point too, I still hadn't really figured out what sort of music I liked. So anything that either sounded operatic or had distorted guitar, I was like, "This is my music," but I had no idea what it was. And then I
yeah.
discovered, like, Nightwish, and then I was good to go, other. All right, my dude. So where can everybody find you if they want to check you out after the fact?
Easiest way would be on YouTube, Emperor Fox. So that's what I'm doing. I still try to make videos regularly. That hasn't been happening as much because life gets in the way. But I've been doing a steady stream of YouTube shorts of me just popping in retro games into systems on my old CRT TV and turning them on, in which people seem to enjoy those. So I'll keep that up, and I do have a couple videos planned. So find me on YouTube.
But you also do cards as well, no?
Oh, I do cards, so I do have a second YouTube channel where I do my second uh, kind of hobbyish is uh, trading card games, and I love cracking packs. And what better way to do it is to crack packs on YouTube and just do quick shorts of me opening packs. And what I do is I usually just end up selling cards and buying more packs, so it's kind of fun. And that channel is called Cracking Dem Packs.
And I'll have links to everything in the description box below or above, depending on wherever the hell they move next time. But anyway, I've been Alex. He's been Emperor Fox, and we'll catch you next time when we play Shining Force. Take care.